Welcome everyone to Meet the Authors Christmas Extravaganza here with Headline Books. We are very fortunate today to have two multi-award winning authors, Heather Dugan, who is the founder and director of Cabernet Coaches and has written several books on relationships, friendships, dating, and Joy Held, who is a certified yoga teacher and a journal facilitator for people a lot of people journal for therapy. So we're going to hear from both these wonderful authors, and we're going to have Heather Dugan go first. So Heather, if you'll take it away, please.
Thank you, Kathy, and hello, Joy. It's wonderful to be with you both today and all of you out there in Facebook land. Yes, I am. I've always been a writer, I guess. I kind of fell into the author thing a few years ago and have done a good amount of speaking now because the topics are things we really need to use in our lives, and it just really fits well. I started out, my first book was on dating. And I recently, through Kathy, published, and that book was Date Like a Grownup. I should probably show you this one. Boom. And then Kathy has helped me with the Friendship Upgrade. And I call the Friendship Upgrade the prequel because a lot of people find space in their lives and they think, I need to date somebody. But the thing is, we need to start with our foundation first, which is the relationship with ourselves and with our friends. So anyhow, the Friendship Upgrade kind of, both my books include a lot of stories. People are really generous about sharing their personal experiences, and that's kind of how we relate to things and understand and begin to implement change in our own life, I think, in best circumstances. And the Friendship Upgrade, I think, is particularly important because it addresses this issue of isolation that has been kind of over us like a cloud the last few years, and especially in this past year. But it kind of goes into some of the reasons that it has been a problem already, which would be surprising to some of you, and goes through ways that we can make things better and how to begin building connection again. Because it's not as easy as it should be when you're an adult and with some of the cognitive changes that happen to us after we've been in that space for a period of time. I did found a group. It was accidental. I was honestly just trying to kind of help myself find new friendships, and Cabernet Coaches was the result of that. Right now, we're pretty virtual because it's difficult to get together in person. Some of us will do some hiking outdoor stuff from time to time, although I myself had surgery and have been in a cast and a walking boot the last few weeks, so the walking's a little different for me these days. But the friendships make all the difference in the way that we approach life. And I think, especially as we go through a tough time like this, that element of connection is critical to really hold yourself in a good place of mental wellness, which of course impacts everything else. And I think Kathy is, I'm not sure if it's frozen right now.
No, Heather,
Okay.
we would like for you to read a short excerpt from one of your books, please.
Sure, I would love to. I think because I'm just friendship. I think the Friendship Upgrade is especially appropriate right now. This one talks about one of the outcomes can be we use old filters when we have been isolated for a period of time. We tend to translate things badly and incorrectly, and this kind of addresses some of that. Loneliness is awkward. Nothing fits. It's less about being alone and more about having no context for connection within your environment. When we're overly efficient, we've less time to establish any sort of framework and tend to run new scenarios through old familiar filters, further solidifying those I'm an outsider feelings. I remember walking into a school meeting shortly after my divorce, certain that all eyes would home in on the naked ring finger on my left hand. My discomfort had to be obvious as I apologetically scanned for empty seats with a tentative, eager to please smile, cautious of intruding on anyone's space with any actual eye contact. As the mother of a student, I certainly belonged there. But my demeanor suggested I'd crash the meeting. because who wouldn't long to spend 90 uncomfortable minutes on a small plastic chair during the dinner hour on a Wednesday?
Heather,
Yes.
for some reason I lost the live feed.
Okay.
So we're going to start over.
The reading part? The reading or the whole thing?
The whole thing. I'm going to delete what we have and
Okay.
we'll start over. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. Did anything I should do differently in what I said? I just kind of.
I think you should talk a little bit longer at the beginning.
Oh, okay. I didn't know how long I had. Okay.
Yeah.
How long? How much longer? I don't want to be a hog.
Oh, I don't know. 5 to 8 minutes is fine.
Okay.
Read.
I'll get a little more into the personal circumstance maybe that led to it.
Okay. Okay. I don't know what happened. I just looked down and it was done.
Well, it was a good practice.
I just told a story that happened to us the other day. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Wait for my introduction. Welcome everyone to our Meet the Authors Christmas Extravaganza, sponsored by Headline Books and the Next Generation Indie Book Awards. We have 2 wonderful multi-award winning authors with us here today. Heather Dugan, she writes about relationships, friendships, and Joy Held, who is a certified yoga teacher, and she is a journal facilitator. We'll hear more about that soon. And right now, each of these wonderful authors are going to tell you a little bit about themselves and read an excerpt from their books. And then we will be taking questions and we'll have a discussion. So those of you who are with us on Facebook, please type your questions in the comment section and we'll make sure that they get answered. So right now, here is Heather Dugan.
Hello there. It is good to be with both of you, Kathy and Joy, and hello to all of you in Facebook. Trying to think where to start. I have been a writer for many years. I did a lot of articles, columns, was kind of more interested in fiction initially, to be honest. It's kind of a little more fun and you can hide a little better. But life kind of took me in a different direction. I had a bunch of events happen at once, as happens to many of us, transitional events that kind of flipped the whole world. And there were some family deaths, divorce, and I found myself in a very isolated space. I had to do some major problem solving on the personal level in order to create the life I really wanted to be in. I didn't like the one I was in at that point, and I realized that I was not really modeling what I wanted for my children to be and see and do going forward. So when life's tough, you kind of, if it feels like it's not quite ready for company, you kind of tend to pull yourself away from things a little bit. And that's what I was doing. So in an effort to solve that, I accidentally founded a group for women called Cabernet Coaches. And over the years, it was just shocking to me to see the impact that simple friendships have on our overall life experience, just how much they enrich our ability to make better decisions. They enlarge our perspective. We see ourselves better, more realistically. So the first book that I wrote was on dating, Date Like a Grownup. That would be this one, because, and truly, a lot of people start there. You have a little bit of space in your life. You're like, oh, I should date. I'll find somebody that wants a fixer-upper, right? Well, I was definitely the fixer-upper. But as I went further into things, I realized that really what I needed first was friendship and connection to my own self. And so out of that experience, the friendship upgrade, and the group as well was very much a part of informing me on that. I do a lot of speaking because these are such important topics, just the mechanics of it, the way that it, like I said, enriches our lives. So I enjoy that very much, the interaction, and I enjoy gathering everybody's stories. There's a lot of stories in both of these books and in the ones I'm working on now, because the personal experiences, mine, yours, everybody's, that's kind of, how we process and begin to make our lives a little better, I think. So the friendship upgrade goes through specifically kind of this whole issue of isolation that's been kind of hovering like a cloud over us all for several years now, actually. It's not a personal downfall when this happens in somebody's life. More often, it's an outcome of some unfortunate circumstances. Much of it's related to our reliance on digital, the way that our communication, instead of having conversations, we've kind of dialed it down to communication. Just simple exchanges of messages. We've been over efficient in the way that we handle this opportunity clutter, is what I call it, everything coming at us, all these decisions to make. And in friendships and relationships have been put on the back burner to our own detriment, because it's a basic human need that we connect. Cigna does a study every, it's the isolation or loneliness index. And as you might expect, it's gotten worse over the last few years. This past year, over, I think it was like 60% said that they lacked meaningful conversations and connection to the people they're with. So it's an important thing, especially right now, that we take a look at our own lives and maybe the lives of those we're connected to see where the disconnects might be so that we can begin to fix them. I'm going to maybe read a little bit from the Friendship Upgrade. There's some things that happen in our brains when we go through a period of isolation and loneliness. It in fact impacts our perception, the way we process things, which eventually it impacts the way we approach people and respond to them. So it's really important to be aware of that aspect of it. This is from a chapter that goes into some of that impact, and it's under the use of old filters, which can be a problem. Loneliness is awkward. Nothing fits. It's less about being alone and more about having no context for connection within your environment. When we're overly efficient, we've less time to establish any sort of framework and tend to run new scenarios through old familiar filters, further solidifying those I'm an outsider feelings. I remember walking into a school meeting shortly after my divorce, certain that all eyes would home in on the naked ring finger on my left hand. My discomfort had to be obvious as I apologetically scanned for empty seats with a tentative, eager-to-please smile, cautious of intruding on anyone's space with any actual eye contact. As the mother of a student, I certainly belonged there, but my demeanor suggested I'd crashed the meeting. Because who wouldn't long to spend 90 uncomfortable minutes on a small plastic chair during the dinner hour on a Wednesday? It's hard to be around women like that. They need more encouragement than can be shared with a simple smile, and they take non-response as negative feedback. Their discomfort makes others uncomfortable and becomes the fuel for that self-perpetuating spiral downwards. But many times, the outsider feeling has less to do with present circumstances than it does with old programming. If childhood memories of exclusion or inattentive or unappreciative parents dwell just beneath the surface, it's likely that the first surge of discomfort will exert a little pressure on that old feeling, releasing it anew. The old feeling is repackaged, but with much of its original freshness. For me, that school meeting triggered time travel back to middle school number 2. Once again, I was wandering the cafeteria with a lunch tray, wishing I could just disappear and wake up when my face had cleared up and my glacially growing breasts had gotten a fair chance to catch up with my nose. In the years since that unmemorable 8th grade debut, I traded Clearasil for moisturizer and discovered underwire bras. But inside, I was still the new kid, hoping to be noticed with the quiet welcome to any awkward but kind wallflower. But a lot of us have felt or feel that way. And if there's time later, I'd be happy to read something else, Kathy, but that's a good start. I am not able to hear you.
So sorry, I forgot to unmute myself.
No problem.
Thank you so much. I know a lot of the viewers, myself, can identify with all those problems, and they are problems you don't expect to experience again later in life.
Right.
Thank you. Joy, I'd like for you to tell us about yourself and the inspiration for your book and read an excerpt. Both of these ladies have different talents, and I think we're going to have a wonderful conversation here. So Joy, go ahead.
Thank you, Kathy. And Heather, what a great story and a great idea that you have about, I'm really intrigued. I'm going to go look up the Cigna study that you mentioned about the loneliness factor, because writing is a very, it's a well-known fact that writing is a very single activity. And writers spend an awful lot of time alone, reading and writing and studying and so forth. And so you're really onto something about the relationship factor and how important it is to so many, to everybody. Writers do have a tendency to sort of get used to being alone, but you know, you've got some really interesting ideas that writers probably could make some good use of. It's one of the things that I would say the loneliness factor as a writer, which I've been for a long time. I'll back up for that in an explanation in a second, but the loneliness factor is what pulled me out or pushed me out, whichever way you want to think of it, out of my house to find a writing critique group to take my writing to on a monthly basis and, you know, share my writing with and get hopefully helpful, constructive criticism, which I did. And this was at a time when my family was young, and I was a freelance writer, a homeschooling mom, and I also taught yoga and dance, besides the fact that I was published, and I had published a lot and at the time. And in the critique group, 3 or 4 of them at one of the meetings said, "How are you getting this all done?" And I honestly, at the time, I did not have an answer. And I said, "I'll get back to you on that." And what I did was I went back to my life and I documented my life for roughly a month or so that the next critique meeting I could say, I now know what I do and I'm willing to share that with you. Are you interested? And they said, yes. And that turned into the very first writer wellness workshop. And with the ideas that I had found, you know, by self-observation and documenting it through journal writing, which was then and still is a really big, important part of my life as a person and a writer, I was able to, you know, help these other writers find their own way, excuse me, to being healthy and productive and satisfied as writers, people, family members, and so forth. And so we got together for 6 weeks. And I just said, okay, let's try this journal. Let's exercise. Have you ever meditated? What did you have for lunch? That sort of thing. And they also documented their process while we were sort of feeling our way together through this first writer wellness experience, really for all of us. And then I said, would you be willing to give me some feedback once we're, you know, done having these meetings? Absolutely. That feedback and my experience is what created the book, Writer Wellness, A Writer's Path to Health and Creativity. And it was first published shortly after that that workshop series, well, a couple years afterwards. And it was at a time period, it was kind of early in the, the self-help wellness, um, uh, you know, what's really popular now. Everybody knows that, you need to take care of yourself better, and that means on the inside as well as the outside and so forth. But when I was first peddling writer wellness, it wasn't even, the word wellness was odd. I had several editors say, well, what is wellness and what kind of, so forth. But I did find a publisher who was forward seeing enough, thinking enough to say, well, yeah, it is important for writers to be healthy, and I like the way you've laid this out. So that's where the book that I have with Headline Books now, it originally came from. But backing up, when other 10-year-olds were asking their, maybe earlier than, I don't know, it might have been a naive 10-year-old, but when other 10-year-olds were asking their mothers where babies come from, I asked my mother where books come from, because I loved reading. As soon as I learned to read, I loved it. I couldn't get enough. I read the newspaper in the second grade. When the newspaper came every day, I could not wait to get home from school so I could read the newspaper in the second grade. I was in the third grade, and my mom said, well, there's this thing called writers and publishers and so forth. And I just loved reading so much, loved books so much. At the age of 10, I had to become a writer, and I did write in school, and I enjoyed it. And so I really began my writing career really, as in grade school. And I won, little county writing awards and stuff like that. But I continued on, and once I got into middle school, junior high, those days, there was the school newspaper, and I signed up to be on the school newspaper staff, and realized that I really liked journalism. And so in the 8th grade, there was an opportunity in a local weekly newspaper for a writer from our junior high newspaper staff to submit to this weekly newspaper, the local paper, events that were going on in our junior high. I took it. And that was really my first professional byline at age 14. And when I said how much I love the newspaper. When I opened that newspaper and I saw my byline for the first time, I was hooked. That was it. That was what I was going to do. I was going to write, and that's really what I've done. But also peripherally, I've had to have a life. I've had to have other work, but I made writing part of my meaningful work. And as I said, I homeschooled, and my daughters are adults now, but I homeschooled for 18 years, even as I was being a freelance writer. And I have almost 1,000 articles published in magazines and newspapers and literary journals all over the country, really, Australia, England, and mostly America, of course. So writing is kind of the kernel of who I am and want to be and would like to continue being. But like I said, there were these other things in my life, and these other things were a background in dance. My mother and her sister operated a dancing school when I was younger, and me and my siblings, we went to the studio. Every time my mother went to the studio, that's where we were. But I also turned that a career, because I danced semi-professionally till I was almost 40. Just last week, by the way, I was 40 last week. That's a little joke. Anyway, I also said, well, there's got to be some right way to combine writing and dance, and I knew there was. And my first national publication was in a monthly magazine called Dance Teacher Now, and I was the teacher feature writer. So I would interview teachers all over the country about their studios and their way they live their lives and their success as artistic people. And then I became a contributing editor to that magazine and followed with several other dance magazines where I wrote for as a freelancer. So it is my love of reading and writing and my experience and career as a dancer, which then led me into putting this all together. And I also loved yoga from way, way back. It was just the right kind of balance, the right kind of opposite thing as to dance, to ballet. And it gave me this feeling of wholeness, this feeling of, of security in who I was physically, mentally, and emotionally. Yoga, it was just magic for me from the very first time I tried it. Fast forward, and now for the last 18 years, I've been a college English professor, as well as I teach yoga and meditation in a college program in Ohio where I work. But right now, all of my classes are virtual. I even teach yoga 3 nights a week, live via Zoom. And my regular students and lots of new students and people who are searching for that, an alternative or a virtual idea for community are, coming to my classes, my yoga classes, and it's been going strong since March. And it's going to continue. So I then, I used to also, I hope to get back someday to doing workshops, because that first writer wellness workshop inspired me, as well as other writers heard about it, inspired me to offer workshops and that sort of thing. And I multiple times a year, I would go out and teach writer wellness at writing conventions and to individual writing groups and so forth. But all of that's gone virtual now as well. I teach writer wellness online for all different kinds of writers groups, primarily, of course. And I have also developed some self-enrichment classes from the concepts of writer wellness. And those 5 concepts are journal writing, exercise, relaxation, sound nutrition, and some and creative play ideas. So before I get into what those specifically are a little bit, I'm going to read a small amount from Writer Wellness, which is about the journaling concept. And I start off by quoting Socrates, philosopher, "The unexamined life is not worth living." The many joys of journaling. Journaling and writers share a long and important history. From the personal journals of Gustave Flaubert that read like a laundry list of how to view life, to the story Bibles many writers create to keep themselves organized throughout the writing process, writers have always had and always will have numerous reasons to keep a journal. A journal can serve writers of all genres in many different ways, chief among them as a place to collect and hash out story ideas. It isn't a waste of valuable writing time to scribble in a journal in advance of working on one's novel. In the words of author James Brown, what matters is how journaling can help the writer come up with ideas, kind of a warm-up to a bigger process. The next step is building on those ideas, discarding some and fleshing out others, developing characters and motives, and arranging the scenes in a logical, meaningful sequence with a firm sense of a beginning, middle, and end. Whether you write your thoughts down in a journal or try to store them all in your head, which I don't recommend, story begins when you dream and brainstorm about people and their problems. Then there is this fascinating practice of documenting not only one's life, but the progress of a book. 2 books by John Steinbeck that fundamentally changed the way I look at myself as a writer and a human include his works Journal of a Novel, The East of Eden Letters, and another book of his, Working Days, The Journals of the Grapes of Wrath. Reading these helped me understand how keeping a journal alongside writing a novel can serve several purposes. One use for a journal is a place to cleanse the palate, so to speak. Before turning to the blank page of the work in progress, reading snippets about Steinbeck's faithfully recorded personal life reinforced my feelings on using a journal as a dumping ground to clear a writer's head prior to working on a current project. All too often, personal issues can make their way into our creative work, and many times that isn't the appropriate venue for hashing out our problems. Steinbeck wrote a page or 2 each morning about his life, thoughts, and sometimes current events in order to warm up his writing arm, as he called it. He also used the journal pages to organize his thoughts about what to write. For example, one day's journal describes his plans for writing. May 9th, Wednesday. It is time, I think, for the book to pause for discussion. It has not done that for a long time. I think that is the way I will do it. That way, first a kind of possible analysis and then quick narrative right to the end. Explain it first and then do it. Steinbeck is just one example of a writer who uses journal writing to stay focused on the creative project at hand. Stu Grafton, prolific mystery author, A is for Alibis, one of her famous books, believes that the writing process is a constant back and forth between the left and right brain hemispheres. She keeps a daily log of her writing progress and says, "This notebook, usually 4 times longer than the novel itself, is like a letter to myself, detailing every idea that occurs to me as I proceed. Sometimes I incorporate, sometimes I modify, many I discard. The journal is a record of my imagination at work, from the first spark of inspiration to the final manuscript." Similar to Steinbeck, Grafton starts each writing day with logging the date into her journal, followed by what's going on in her life, then a note about ideas she has for the books she's writing. She talks to herself about where the story could go and explores the writer's question, what if, in the privacy and safety of a for my eyes only journal. Grafton claims that this collection of meandering thoughts helps her jumpstart the creative juices, and before she knows it, she's writing new pages. That's one of the many ways that I personally use journaling, because I'm also a fiction writer. And besides as a place to kind of park my ideas and my problems, it's a place for me to, it's a playground for me, as well as a cleanse the palate sort of thing.
Thank you, Joy. I think the wonderful thing about your book and Heather's book is they both address the fact that if you can't be creative and have a creative outlet, whether it's writing, music, art, the rest of your life is not going to be very well-rounded. I'd like both of you to speak to, and Heather, will have you go first, to why your book is relevant during the pandemic times we have been through. I think both these books are relevant, and I'd like for you to speak to that, and Heather, we'll start with you.
Sure. I wish it weren't as relevant as it absolutely is. And also with the election process we've been going through right now, I've been doing a lot of interviews on that as well. We came into this with a deficit. I kind of have described COVID as the squeeze we didn't need, emotionally speaking, because as I mentioned before, we already were very disconnected more and more from one another. part of it is lifestyle. And I was one of the busy moms. I know, Joy, you mentioned your life. I had 3 young kids. They're now all 3 adults. My youngest is a senior at Ohio State. But those years, I remember thinking, these are the best years of my life. Dear God, help me get enough sleep so I can remember some of it. It was overwhelming. And to do it as a single mom then, there wasn't time to make the kinds of connections. And a lot of people have been living in that zone. We have so many opportunities coming at us all the time. And I think they've also served as distractions. And I think that's been a little disconcerting for people now as we go through this epidemic, because the distractions aren't there anymore. And we're left with ourselves and whatever connections we've managed to build. And for some people, they have found they're not quite as deep or as broad as maybe they had hoped or needed. People that were tied to a workplace schedule and have lost that structure. Here we are now, and they might be seeing the gap. Now, here's the other issue that goes with that. Over time, we get very used to whatever we're in. We hate it going into it, but I can't tell you how many people I have spoken with, and it's kind of a research-backed thing. You get in the middle of it, and you lose your momentum and your incentive to do the things you need to fix your connections again. And my fear as we come out of this eventually is that there are going to be a lot of people that won't know how to stop hibernating, so to speak, from the world. Because as I mentioned, there's cognitive changes that happen with isolation. There's a negative skewing that happens where, a positive event, you're like, yay, in normal times. Well, when you've been isolated for a while and your brain is going through this I'm lonely feeling, it kind of gets dialed down to, yay, I'm king of the molehill. It's like everything goes down. Neutral's negative, positive's neutral. And then we also get more defensive. And I've seen certainly, and of course with the mask use and our loss of our reliance on digital has removed a lot of the visual and vocal context that we usually use to understand one another. So right now there's less of that as well. But the thing is, the more that we spend apart from people and the less practice we have, which, we can also apply that to the next generation. There's been less verbal practice for a lot of those young men and women. The less easy it becomes to speak aloud to people and to initiate things. I gave a talk last month, and one of the women, an older woman, said, she got in the habit finally of talking with a friend on a daily basis, because it's almost like, you're afraid, will my voice even work after a while? And if you are alone for a while, that defensiveness might become a situation where somebody doesn't see you and your brain says, they're ignoring me, which then cycles into this whole spinning thing that takes us down deeper and deeper in that rut. So one of the things with this book, I really hope, I want people to be, communities to be aware that people are not necessarily going to do what they need to do to save themselves. And we just need to be more aware of the issues that are tied to this so that we can perhaps, hopefully together, pull ourselves back out and begin to connect in a real way.
That's so true. And Joy, I know that you are doing online yoga classes, isn't that right? And I think you have both touched on the fact that you need to have a healthy mind and a healthy body too, to be functional, particularly during these stressful times. So, Joy, how is your book relevant to what everybody's going through right now?
It's actually, I could look at it and from the perspective of the concepts in my book, following the practices, if you will, would undoubtedly give you a deeper connection to self. And this is actually, in some respects, a good opportunity to take the time to really self-reflect on who you are, what matters, what you want to do, where you're going, as far as yourself personally, in your family life, and in your community. Because one of the things that we're discovering, or at least that I'm discovering about it during this time period, is who really cares? who really cares. And that's about a lot of things, about me, about life, about writing, and so forth. And I am also, because everything that I was doing has gone virtual, the people that I was not connected to because of distance, students that I had in many of my classes as a college educator, they're all over the world now, but they're back in my yoga class right now, just by logging in from India, where one of my former yoga students is and now teaches yoga herself. And another of my students is in Kentucky, and another one in California. And it's been really wonderful to connect with them through the virtual. So I'm trying to find the positives as much as possible on a daily basis, because I'm well aware of the negatives, but the negatives go down in my journal, and I just try to assess them from the perspective that what can I learn from this? So journaling is where really I'm diving deep for myself, and others could do the same, to find out, what can I learn from what's going on right now? Not just about myself, but about my community, and how am I going to accept the new normal? How am I going to function? Because things are going to be different when we will come out of this. That's the positive aspect of it. We will come out of it, and everything will be different. And I personally don't see a bad thing there. But again, that's me doing my best to find, the sunny side, the glass half full, as much as I can.
That's so true. Joy, I'd like for you to tell people how they can get in touch with you. I know that both of you do virtual events, podcasts. So with the minutes we have remaining, Joy, if you'll tell people how they can get in touch with you, please.
All right. It is very simple. Everything's at one website, which is www.joyeheld.com. Emails there, contact form, schedule of my events, and information about writer wellness. joyeheld.com.
Terrific. Thank you. And Heather, how can people get in touch with you?
Thank you. My book's available. I should mention Friendship Upgrade is also on audiobook, because I started out in voiceover work. I still do some of that as well. HeatherDuganAuthor.com. Dugan is spelled D-U-G-A-N. You can get in touch with me there about books, about speaking. If you have events that you are interested in, I do some workshops, and I'm virtual. Hopefully in real life again, we'll be back to normal. Although I hate to call it new normal, I'm kind of calling it myself the new familiar. This isn't the way it's supposed to be for any of us. I'm also on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and I love to hear from people, because this is how we learn. I mean, yes, I do a lot of research, but the conversations are really what inform kind of the way I process, I think, things. We all do it. So HeatherDuganAuthor.com, online social media, would love to hear from you. Thank you, Kathy.
Sure thing. And let me ask both of you before we leave, what's in the works for each of you? What are you working on that's coming out next, or new projects? Heather, you want to go first?
Sure. Well, Kathy knows I've been finishing a workbook for the Friendship Upgrade for some time here. I've had a few things fall in place in the middle. I'm also working on a project I'm really excited about, that working title is How to Be Happy While Human. And it kind of addresses some of the things it actually grew out of some of our talks, Kathy, with our virtual conversations we've had on here with readers. But some of the input we have taken through our lives that's faulty, and that is impacting the way that we are able to enjoy our life and connect with other people. There's some little fixes. Some of them are just tweaks that we can do that really change life. It's like the filter changes, and I found it useful in my life, and I really want to share that with people in book form.
Wonderful. Joy, what's your new project you're working on?
I also have potentially a workbook associated with writer wellness, but I'm also a fiction writer, and I have 2 historical romance novels published. But I've decided to step a little bit out of the adult, and I'm right now for NaNoWriMo trying to get the 50,000 words written on a new project, which is a young adult fantasy historical. And it's about a mermaid and in post Civil War America in South Carolina. That's all I'm going to tell you.
That's great. That sounds very exciting. Well, I want to thank both of you so much for coming on our Christmas extravaganza week. There are links in the Facebook comments to these authors' books, and also how to get in touch with them. We do have more programming coming up today through Saturday, so I hope that everyone will join us for that. And we do want to thank the Next Generation Indie Book Awards. They are helping to sponsor our Meet the Authors Christmas extravaganza this week. So thank you very much. I hope you both have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
You too, Kathy.
We will see you soon. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, right, well.